Taihu. I so wish I could be with you in person at this important Chinese cultural forum, but I am happy that I can at least be with you virtually to briefly talk with you about laying some of the missing foundations for a more sustainable, equitable, harmonious, and caring way of living on this earth. An enterprise to which I am passionately committed, not only through my research and writing and advocacy, but as a mother and grandmother, deeply concerned, as so many of us are, about what kind of future our children will inherit. As those of you familiar with my books, which by the way have all been translated into Chinese by the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, this subject has been the focus of my multidisciplinary, cross-cultural study of societies for over 3 decades. And based on findings from this research, I want to propose to you that to move to a truly civilized world, we must pay close attention to matters that are not yet considered in most analysis or in the conventional discourse. Because, as Einstein observed, we cannot solve problems with the same thinking that created them. Now, one such matter consists of findings from neuroscience showing that nothing less than how our brains develop largely hinges on the interaction of genes with environments, especially in our early years. So any substantial long-range cultural change requires particular attention to the cultural construction of our most formative relations, the relations without which none of us would be here, the relations between the female and male halves of humanity and between them and their daughters and sons, because it is through both experiencing and observing these relations that children first learn what a culture considers normal or abnormal, possible or impossible, valuable or not valuable. Now, we've all been taught, of course, to consider these just women's issues and just children's issues, even though they're issues concerning the majority of humanity. In reality, these are issues that directly impact everything, including environmental sustainability and economic prosperity. And I can quickly give you some empirical evidence. We at the Center for Partnership Studies did a study called Women, Men, and the Global Quality of Life. We compared 2 bundles of statistical data from 89 nations. One bundle consisted of measures of general quality of life, all the way from infant mortality and access to potable water to the ratio of wealth between those on top and bottom, environmental ratings, and so on. The other bundle consisted of measures of the status of women. And what we found is that in significant respects, the status of women can be a better predictor of general quality of life than GDP, which is the measure, of course, policymakers so heavily rely on. Since that pioneering study, others have confirmed these findings. The World Values Survey, based on data from 65 societies representing 80% of the world's population, found a strong relationship between support for gender equality and a society's economic development and quality of life. The annual World Economic Forum's gender gap reports show that nations with the lowest gender gaps consistently rank high in the World Economic Forum's measures of global economic competitiveness. Now, the reason for these correlations, and yes, that these nations rate high in global competitiveness, is not only that women are half the population, or as the Chinese proverb has it, that women hold up half the sky, or that women in many world regions are so disproportionately poor that according to UNIFEM, women are 70% of those living in absolute poverty, which means, of course, starvation or near starvation. The reason for these correlations go even deeper to cultural dynamics we must understand to build a more sustainable and harmonious way of living. That there is a relationship between the status of women and a culture's guiding operational values. Specifically, as the status of women rises, so does the economic value given to activities stereotypically considered soft, feminine, such as caring for children, the sick, maintaining a clean and healthy home environment, whether performed by women or men, whether in business or government policies. And we dramatically see this in the nations with the lowest gender gaps. Nations such as Norway, Sweden, and Finland. Nations that at the beginning of the 20th century were so poor that there were famines that today have very, very low poverty rates, including low poverty rates for woman-headed households, as well as a generally high standard of living for all. And a major reason for this fundamental change is that these nations invested heavily in developing their people's capacities through universal health care, stipends to help families care for children, parenting education, high-quality early childhood education, family planning education, generous paid parental leave for both mothers and fathers, and other caring policies. But none of this happened in a vacuum. It happened with the move to a more equal partnership between women and men in both the family and the state. So much so that women are approximately 40% of their national legislatures, and having a woman head of state, well, that's just commonplace. Now, studies show that as a bloc, women tend to vote for more caring policies. Not all women, of course. However, that is only part of the story, because what happens is that as the status of women rises, men no longer consider it such a threat to their status, their so-called, quote, masculinity, to also embrace more soft, caring, stereotypically feminine values, activities, and yes, fiscal priorities. And I want to here emphasize something important. These nations did not invest in caring for people because they were wealthy. It was the other way around. They became wealthy because as nations invest in caring for people, they become more prosperous. And not coincidental, these nations have also invested in taking better care of our natural environment. In short, while these are certainly not perfect societies, they are in the forefront of the movement toward a caring economy. Now, again, we're not used to putting caring and economy in the same sentence, are we? But as I said, to meet our unprecedented economic, social, environmental challenges, we really have to move beyond the old thinking, including the old, tired debate between capitalism and socialism. Because look, we need both markets and government planning. These nations have that. But both markets and government planning have to be guided by an ethos of caring. Now, all this is documented in detail in my most recent book, The Real Wealth of Nations, which proposes a new way of thinking about and structuring both cultural and economic systems because they are inextricably interconnected. We're talking about self-organizing, interactive dynamics. And I want to add that this is essential not only for human well-being and environmental sustainability, but for economic success, yes, for economic competitiveness in our post-industrial knowledge service era. Consider this is a time when economists keep telling us that the most important capital for this new era is what they like to call high-quality human capital. Flexible, creative, resilient people who can work in teams, who can solve problems innovatively. And again, what we also know today from neuroscience is that whether this high-quality human capital is or is not developed largely hinges on the quality of care and education children receive early on. Indeed, as automation, robotics, and artificial intelligence increasingly replace work once done by people, investment in supporting, well, the most important human work, the work only humans can do, the work of caring for people and nature in both the market and the non-market sectors, yes, in families as well as in the market, is ever more critical. And this takes me to a concrete step that is essential to move forward: developing and implementing new ways of measuring economic health. This is why a key goal of the Center for Partnership Studies' Caring Economy campaign is developing social wealth indicators that show the enormous return on investment from caring for people and for nature. So I want to close with a 3-minute video we did at the Center for Partnership Studies about these indicators, as well as about our Caring Economy campaign. And I also want to invite you to join us in this exciting enterprise of building solid foundations for that better future we so want and need.